So, an interesting question for the day. Jeb Bush, back in 2009, committed voter fraud. It is a crime. It's a third-degree felony in the state of Florida. 5 years in jail for lying on your voter registration form. And Jeb Bush claimed that he was Hispanic. Now, did he do that because his wife is Hispanic? Did he do that because he wanted to shout out to Hispanics who might vote for him? Did he do that because he wanted to mess with the statistics? Did he do that because he was sort of only half paying attention? That seems kind of tough, but in fact, actually what he clicked was Hispanic, not white. Why did he do that? That's one question. But the bigger question is, should he be in jail? Yesterday, I brought this up yesterday. I talked about it briefly. And this had been known for a couple of days, and the Bush campaign, the Jeb Bush campaign, had essentially said nothing. They said nothing about it. They did nothing about it. They figured it would blow over, no big deal. And then the Democrats in Florida, and you can see a good piece about this over at politicasusa.com. .com or .com. The Democrats in Florida started saying, hey, let's put this guy in jail. Let's charge him with voter fraud. Now, the most recent ones that I think were the most high visibility voter fraud cases, not necessarily the most recent ones, but the ones that stick in my mind, are Mitt Romney bragging when he was running for president that he had committed voter fraud just so that he could vote against Ted Kennedy. He and his wife no longer lived in Massachusetts. He was no longer the governor. They were gone. They had this mansion in California, one of 5 or 6 other houses. But they had no home in Massachusetts. One of their sons had a home with an unfinished basement. Now, unfinished means unfinished. There's no place to live in an unfinished basement unless you, kind of like the lifestyle of homeless people or, Skid Row folks or whatever. I mean, it's if you like sleeping on concrete and peeing in the corner, unfinished basement, fine. But Mitt Romney listed his son's unfinished basement as his residence so that he could vote against Ted Kennedy and then bragged about it. He committed voter fraud. He didn't actually live there. And when you sign that form, you say, I actually, nobody ever prosecuted Mitt Romney. I mean, Ann Coulter did the same thing. She put her agent's name as her address as her address. Now, that was a little more understandable. Ann Coulter was concerned about people, voter registration forms are public records. And she didn't want people to knock on her door. I get that. I'm in the public eye. I'm a registered voter. My address is probably quite easily found. And I understand, wanting to have a little bit of space between yourself and somebody who might not like you coming to knock on your door. And in my case, I'm fortunate I live in a marina, so there's actually security. It's sort of a gated community, although, but whatever. And who knows, maybe Ann does too. I have no idea where Ann Coulter lived. And I don't know what kind of alarm system she had or what kind of, armed ninja squad she has in her front room, but she felt that she had to lie on her voter registration form. We can cut her a little slack. But Jeb Bush, lying on his voter registration form? I mean, here's the question. Are Republicans serious about voter fraud or not? They keep passing these laws that make it harder and harder for people to vote. They knocked 300,000 people off the voting rolls in Wisconsin. Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State in Kansas, has put together a database with millions of names on it in as I recall, over 30 states, in the neighborhood of 30 states, so that those states can knock people off the voting rolls just before the elections. And if you get knocked off the voting rolls before the election, by the way, you show up to vote and they say, your name's not here. But you can vote anyway. Here's a provisional ballot. And most people don't realize it's just a placebo ballot. It's not it's a real ballot. It looks like a real ballot. It is a real ballot, but it never gets counted. Unless you come back within, it depends on the state, but unless you come back within a day or so of the election, you go to the election office, you present the proper ID, say, yes, I'm me, and you prove that you actually were registered. And then the state has to figure out why they deregistered you. And they may never get around to that. I mean, this is what happened in 2000 when Jeb Bush ordered Katherine Harris to hire a company in Texas to take the Texas felon list and compare it with the Florida registered voter list. Now, Texas is notorious, and has been for some time, but particularly over the last 20 years, for arresting black people for all kinds of things, but especially drug offenses. So if you're looking at the Texas felon list, you're looking at an awful lot of black people, and there are some fairly common names that happen in the black community, a legacy of slavery and whatnot. And so when you compare the Texas felon list to the Florida registered voter list, and if you do like Katherine Harris did at the behest of Jeb Bush when he was governor of Florida in 2000, if you say, they don't even have to match exactly. Jim Washington in Texas could be James Q. Washington in Florida. James Q. Washington in Texas could be Jim W. Washington in Florida. Knock them off. And somewhere between 60 and 80,000 African Americans were removed from the voting lists just weeks before the election of 2000, getting George W. Bush within spitting distance of stealing the election. With the help of the Supreme Court. So Jeb Bush, he understands voter fraud. This is a guy who used the excuse of voter fraud. Oh my God, we've got 80,000 black people in this state who are registered to vote, but they're actually felons. And the way we prove it is, look at here, this person by this name was convicted in Texas. No effort to say they ever actually moved to Florida or that there was the same person or compare address. None of that. Just a similar name. And similar was good enough because, those people use aliases. This is the Jeb Bush mentality. Is the Republican Party serious about voter fraud? If they are, then why are the Republicans not calling for Jeb Bush to be prosecuted for voter fraud? Republicans they're not only hysterical about voter fraud, they're hysterical about Hispanics. A bus full of young people from, literally fleeing murder and rape in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. A bus full of these young kids met by a large group of Republicans saying, get the hell out, go away, scare the hell out of the little kids. So Republicans are hysterical about Hispanics, hysterical about voting fraud. And Jeb Bush committed both. If you don't commit Hispanic, but you know what I mean. Jeb Bush steps into both, right? He claims he's Hispanic on his voting registration form when he's not. He's facing a 5-year felony in the state of Florida. So, will the Republicans prosecute? Florida's run by Republicans. Is Rick Scott going to prosecute Jeb Bush? Has anybody called Rick Scott's office to ask if he's going to prosecute Jeb Bush for voter fraud? That would be a really interesting question. Maybe we could do that during the break at the bottom of the hour. We'll be back. Actually, it'll be lunch.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I guess we'll have to do it an hour from now. But what do you think? Should he be prosecuted for, or was this just a simple mistake? And if so, how many others are there?